So in this video, I want to talk about how I converted this tiny corner of a spare room in my house into a fully fledged remote session setup for professional recording as a place to film these videos and create social media content, and as a functional music room to help me play guitar and quickly record and capture ideas. So if you are just getting started in your journey of creating a home recording setup, or if you just want some ideas on how to maximize a small space in a normal conventional home, then this video is going to give you plenty of ideas. So recording guitar is a big part of my life as a musician. It's something that I do on a daily basis, whether that's recording guitar parts for these YouTube videos, creating posts for social media, or doing remote sessions. And I live in the middle of North Wales. I'm not in a big city. I don't have recording studios nearby, but I've made this space work for me. So in this video, I'm going to talk about all the equipment that I have in here, why I've chosen it, what I would maybe recommend, talk through some of the mistakes that I've made in accumulating recording gear in the past, and all of the equipment and products listed in this video will be linked in the description, and they are affiliate links. So I do receive a small commission if you purchase any of these products via those links, but this video is not sponsored. I'm not being paid to promote any of the products shown. These are just things that I've had direct experience with that I want to share with you guys. So if you want to support the channel, that is a great way to do it, but obviously no obligation to do so. So I just wanted to quickly mention before we move on to the specifics of the gear in here, I wanted to talk a little bit about that ethos of why I've created this space in the way that I have. And that's because for me, if there is barriers to getting going, whether that's just, time or setup to actually getting the guitar in your hands and creating music, if there's any kind of resistance there, I'm always reluctant to actually get started. So everything here is designed to be plug and play. If I have an idea, if I have that inspiration and that motivation to be creative, I don't want to then have to spend half an hour getting everything in here set up just so I can start playing some sounds. So if that's something that you resonate with, then hopefully you're going to find a ton of value in this. And since this is a guitar related channel, let's start there, talking about this amp, which is kind of the mothership of this whole setup. Now, if you live in the UK, you probably have neighbors. We absolutely love sticking houses right next to each other. So it's definitely important to think about your recording setup when it comes to amps, because yes, it's great to be able to stick a microphone on a cabinet and get the amp working, but it's just not always feasible when you're recording at home. So I've always been looking for sort of solutions that enable me to record silently. It's definitely an important aspect of this space, because not only do we have neighbors, but I also live with my girlfriend, who is extremely patient, but again, she doesn't want to listen to me playing guitar for like 8 hours a day. So I have done videos in the past about sort of plugins, and there's tons of great options now for things like the Neural DSP plugins for amp simulators, and even Logic and some of your DAWs have some built-in software for that. But I always find that there's kind of something missing from those kind of virtual amps. But when I got the Revv D20, I finally found something that sort of felt like a tube amp. That kind of feel is something that's really important for me when I'm trying to capture performances, because I want it to come across in my playing. I don't want to feel like I'm fighting the sound too much. And this Revv D20 has really, really impressed me. It has the 2 notes torpedo built in, but it is a 20 watt switchable down to 4 watt all tube head. So your preamp section is, completely analog, and then your output stage or the cabinet stage is virtual through the 2 notes. So you've got this kind of cabinet selector on the front, so you've got 6 presets that you can load in there via the software, and then you've got 3-band EQ, you've got gain for a preamp gain, and then you've got master volume. It's just a really, really great platform. And what I find really great about a solution like this, and obviously there's a few amps on the market now that have this kind of technology built in, is that it gives you consistency, right? It's kind of like from day to day, from session to session, I kind of know what I'm going to get out of this amp. And it doesn't matter whether I take this to a studio or whether I'm doing stuff at home, it's going to be consistent across the board. And that's something that I find really, really important for my own playing, at least. And all I'm doing is I'm taking an XLR out of the back of this amp because it does have an XLR out for the 2 Notes virtual cab sim, and that's then going into my interface, which is where we will go next. Now the XLR output of my amp then goes into channel 1 of my audio interface, which I must have had for coming up to 3 years now, and that's the Audience ID14. It's a 2-channel interface. It's pretty straightforward, it's really affordable. This is something that I probably will want to upgrade this year. I am looking at the Universal Audio stuff, but this has done me well for a number of years now. It's been really reliable, the preamps sound really good, and there's a ton of great monitoring options, which is something that we'll come on to. But even if you're not going to be using, virtual cabs or, an aux box or something like that, if you do just want to run a microphone onto your guitar amp, which is a perfectly great home solution if you do have the space and, compassionate housemates / neighbors, then it's the same process. You would just take your XLR off the microphone on the cab and plug it into channel 1. That's exactly the same principle as what I'm doing here. And that output from the amp in channel 1 is set up all the time. I never take it out. So I know whenever I turn on my computer and open my DAW that channel 1 is always going to be set up and ready to go. And then for channel 2, which is again an XLR input, I can then plug in a microphone like this. This is an SE Electronics X1S. This is my condenser microphone. This is what I will typically use for kind of recording voiceover, for videos. If I'm recording acoustic guitar, I will often stick this microphone on there. Or if I am recording an actual amp, this is something that I can pair with something like a SM57 or a dynamic microphone just to get a bit more tonal variety. And that is what I would then plug into channel 2. And the ace up the sleeve of this interface is the fact that it also has a dedicated DI input on the front. So if I don't want to record my acoustic guitar with a microphone, if I'm just kind of recording a kind of quick backing track or a demo or an idea, I might not want to necessarily bother setting up a microphone, or if it's particularly sort of like noisy in the house, if my girlfriend is working from home or something like that, there might be a lot of noise that doesn't kind of lend itself well to a microphone. Then I can just record straight into the DI. So I'll just plug in the normal guitar cable into my acoustic and plug that into the DI, and I can record then direct into my DAW without worrying about external noise or anything like that. It's a great convenient solution that just enables me to get started and to get some ideas onto the page or onto the computer in this instance. So now let's talk about monitoring. How are you going to listen back to what you're recording? Now, this is where I have a bit of an imperfect setup, but I've tried to make it work, and I'm really reasonably happy with how I've got this working. But there are just some things that I would avoid if your space isn't necessarily treated acoustically to be able to be optimized for kind of recording in the room or monitoring within the room. Now, you'll notice that I just have one monitor, which is this M-Audio BX5, I think it's called. I have one because the other one broke. So I currently don't have a stereo setup for monitoring. This is basically what I will use if I'm just kind of like sat here doing admin or kind of listening to a podcast. I'll often just play it through there in mono. So I'm not really kind of using this for referencing or for listening back. I'm using headphones because, again, this room, as you'll notice, is wood paneled. It's not great. There's reflections all over the place, and I'm not really going to be living here long enough to, bother getting this place acoustically treated. We are going to be buying a house this year, so when I move, that's where I'm going to kind of create the perfect home studio, taking all the things that I've learned from my experience here and sort of, adapting and improving upon that. But I think if you invest in a good pair of studio monitoring headphones, that's going to give you, again, consistency from place to place. Because the thing is with me is that, yes, I'm recording in here most of the time, but I'm also going to studios or I'm going to friends' houses to record or to, have writing sessions. And often I'll just bring along a MacBook with you know, these headphones, which are a pair of Shure SRH440s. Again, they're not particularly expensive. I will be upgrading these as well this year. They're fine, but after a good sort of like 3 or 4 hours, they do tend to hurt my ears a little bit. They're not the most padded. I want something a little bit comfier. But if you're just getting started, they're really, really good. The main thing to think about with headphones is that you want to get some that have as flat a frequency response as possible. Some headphones that are kind of consumer grade headphones, the actual EQ of the sound within those headphones, the actual EQ is boosted and cut for certain frequencies to make it a more kind of pleasing listening experience for the casual listener. You know, bass is often boosted, things like high end might be cut a little bit, which is absolutely fine if you're wanting to listen to music, but if you're wanting to mix or if you're wanting to record, you don't want anything coloring the actual audio tracks that you're recording. You want something that's flat. So monitoring headphones are essential. If you go on manufacturers' websites, you can often get the frequency response of your headphones. Just make sure that they're as flat as possible, meaning no coloration, and make sure that they cover a frequency range that is suitable for the music that you play. You know, these go all the way up to, I think, 20 kilohertz at the high end, and probably a low of maybe sort of like 40 or 50 hertz. Don't quote me on that. I will put it up on screen or down in the description. But either way, this is covering the full frequency range of what I need for the type of music that I create. And on the point of monitoring, that's also why I enjoy the Audient ID14, because the monitoring capabilities of this interface, you know, it's really intuitive. From a click of a button, I can go from headphones to the actual monitors, and I've got then independent control of the volume of each. So when I do get another monitor and I've got my stereo set up, if I want to reference tracks through headphones compared to speakers, I can quickly do that and I can independently set those volumes, which from a workflow standpoint is something that is really nice. So let's move on and talk about some more hardware stuff, but this time related to computing and all of the actual computer-based stuff of this setup. So my computer is an M1 chip Mac Mini from, I believe, 2022. It's pretty much base spec, but I have upped the RAM to 16 gig because of all the video editing and because of the recording that I'm doing. I want to have that RAM because I want everything to kind of run pretty smoothly. I don't want things, especially when it comes to video editing, to kind of get all slow and clunky. And I definitely recommend anybody who is doing any kind of creative work on a computer to upgrade the RAM before anything else. And the reason that I've gone for the Apple Mac Mini is because I use Logic Pro 10 as my DAW. It's native to Apple, so I can't necessarily use that on a PC. And because I use Final Cut Pro 10 for my video editing, I like everything to be kind of in the Apple ecosystem. And I absolutely love the Mac Mini. The reason that I got that over kind of like a desktop or something like a MacBook Pro, because yes, I do have a MacBook Pro for sort of, you know, on the fly and just for kind of doing things kind of outside of the house. But if I do want to take the kind of brains of the whole operation to another studio or to a friend's house, I can actually just travel with my Mac Mini and plug it into an external monitor or, you know, wherever I'm going. It's something that is incredibly portable for a desktop setup. So I would just say don't worry too much about the computer itself, just kind of get whatever you're comfortable and familiar using, but I would definitely be kind of wary of RAM. You want 16 gig as a minimum for this sort of stuff. And then what I tend to do is get some external SSDs, like these sort of lacy drives, or lackey, however you pronounce it. My Mac Mini does have 0.5 terabyte of internal storage, but I tend not really to use that because, again, I like to have all of my kind of files, if you like, on something external, because if I am then traveling from place to place, if I want to kind of do a writing session with somebody else, I can store everything onto these, you know, these external SSDs. I think this one is 2 terabytes, and then I have another one which is 4 terabytes, which is kind of my main backup, and this is for more current projects that I'm currently working on. This is also where I will save things like plugins that I might use in Logic, my sound libraries, or things in Final Cut Pro, like some of my project files and some of my kind of main libraries for video editing. Most of the stuff is run off of these. There's obviously tons of different SSDs out there now. Orange is my favorite color, so that was a big reason that I decided to get these ones. But I also find that they perform really well. You know, there's no lag or issues with speed in terms of kind of reading and writing off of these. So yeah, I can definitely recommend them. Like I said, I've got a couple, and these just help me kind of take my sounds, if you like, wherever I go. So my Mac Mini is run into this monitor, which is an Asus Pro Art. Because I'm a videographer and photographer, you know, I do stuff for this YouTube channel. It's not just a screen for me. I do video editing, photo editing. So I need something that has accurate color referencing. It also is 1080p. I don't really do anything in 4K. Most of my videos on here are just in 1080p, so I don't necessarily need 4K resolution. That's something that would be nice to have in the future. But again, this is just something that works well for me, because not only is it a nice display for just kind of day-to-day computer work and for, you know, using the DAW, but when I am doing my video editing, it's got, you know, ample capabilities for that as well. And as I mentioned, my DAW of choice is Logic Pro 10. It's just something that I've used ever since I did my degree. I'm very much kind of a fan of sticking to what I know, because it means from a workflow standpoint, I can kind of get around pretty quickly and I sort of know where things are. And that's just less of a barrier for getting started for recording for me. This is just quite intuitive. So if you're familiar with a different DAW, then it's important to kind of go with that. Feel free to experiment. Obviously, most of the industry standards are Pro Tools or Logic for most studios. I haven't really encountered, from a session perspective, anything outside of that, but obviously there's now DAWs such as Luna, which are becoming more and more popular. So again, it's just kind of choosing something that works for you. But from a workflow standpoint for me, because some of the producers that I work with also use Logic Pro 10, when it comes to kind of transferring files and stems and all of that kind of thing, we're all sort of running off the same system, or we're all on the same page. So it just makes it a little bit easier from that standpoint. And in terms of kind of Logic Pro 10, there are just kind of some plugins that I've gotten for free. Crow Hill Company, a kind of recent company that's just gotten started, have done some great free plugins for things like piano and for just some various other sound libraries. I have some of those, which again are stored on my Lacy drives, which again I just input in here, but I often just use the actual free plugins within Logic. If I need some specific modulation, then I find those work really well. And obviously as a guitar player, I do have a pedal board that does most of the heavy lifting in terms of my kind of modulation and my effects. So as much as I could go down the rabbit hole of getting some more plugins, which would definitely be something that I'd be interested in doing this year, I find if you're just getting started as well, then there's tons out of the box that you can sort of easily get started with. So back onto kind of instruments and music making stuff, I also have this electric piano. It's something that I've been kind of enjoying playing since, well, I guess this autumn just gone. This is a Yamaha P45. It's not necessarily the most, I guess, sensible solution for a small space. I'd probably be better getting a smaller MIDI controller, which I used to have in kind of the old place where I used to live. This actually belongs to my mum, but she hasn't played it in 2 years, so I decided to kind of become the custodian of it, because it has a USB out, which I can plug in to my computer, and I'm just hoping that she's not going to ask for it back anytime soon. But this is just something that I like to use just for recording backing tracks, or if I'm working on some songs and I just want to get some piano for some references or just for some interesting sounds. I just basically use this as a glorified MIDI controller. And then in terms of other instruments, we obviously have all of my guitars, which I won't necessarily go into too much detail, but again, I have a rack of guitars that are just, you know, easily accessible, grab and go. And then I also have my pedal board, which lives under my desk. And again, that's routed into my amp at all times. So as soon as I plug it in and turn on my computer, I've got everything kind of set up and ready to go. And those just include the pedals that I use most frequently. And then I have sort of a few extras that I can switch in and out, depending on the song or whatever sound I'm going for at that time. So there we are. Thanks for joining me on this tour of my teeny tiny home recording setup here. If you have any questions about any of the gear that I've spoken about, then leave a comment down below. As mentioned, all the gear featured, for the most part, will be linked in the description with some affiliate links. So if you are happy to support the channel, purchasing through those links does just give me a little kickback, a little commission, which just goes a long way to help support this channel, helps me carry on making these videos, which from this point forward are going to be done on a weekly basis. I want to make these videos as engaging and up the value of production as much as possible, and kind of doing 2 videos a week, I just felt like I was kind of sacrificing quality a little bit more than I'm comfortable with. So videos will be going out every week on a Wednesday. If you've enjoyed this one, make sure to give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and ring the bell to get notified at what time on Wednesdays these videos will be going live. Hope to see you all in the next one. Thanks for joining me today. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I will see you all very soon.